3 junior engineers for your salary. Nothing personal, Daniel. It's just business. That's what they told him as they slid the termination folder across the table. But what they didn't know was they'd just fired the only person who knew how the entire system worked. At 56, Daniel Cole wasn't just any engineer. He was the living blueprint of Meridian Living Solutions' digital heart. For 18 years, Daniel had quietly built the company's entire IT infrastructure from the ground up, one line of code at a time. It all started back in 2006, when the company was still known as Pacific Oak Realty, a small real estate firm based in Charleston, South Carolina. 2 dusty desktops, a fax machine and a dial-up connection. That's all they had. But they had vision. Founder Raymond Oak wanted to grow, and he needed a system that could grow with him. Enter Daniel. He didn't just create a platform, he architected a living ecosystem, one that handled everything from tenant onboarding to maintenance requests, automated billing, and security protocols most Fortune 500s would envy. But then came the acquisition. The new owners renamed the company to Meridian Living Solutions, and with them came shiny buzzwords: agile, cloud-native, cost-optimized. More meetings, less understanding. Daniel noticed the shift. His budget requests for proper documentation declined. His seat at the table slowly phased out. And then came Ethan McCall, 42, MBA from Wharton, sharp suit, sharper smile. Newly appointed CTO, hired to streamline operations. Daniel saw the writing on the wall. So when Ethan called a routine check-in meeting, Daniel showed up on time and quietly sat across from HR and the man who would end his tenure. "We've done a cost analysis," Ethan began, almost casually, "and frankly, we can hire 3 junior engineers for what we pay you, nothing personal." Diane from HR slid the folder across the table. Severance package, 2 months' salary and unused vacation. Daniel nodded, took the folder and asked, "That all?" He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just stood up, gathered 18 years of his life into a single cardboard box, and walked out. No one in that room realized what they'd just done. Because Daniel wasn't just the guy who maintained the system. He was the system, and they were about to find out the hard way. They thought 3 college degrees could replace one man who built the system by hand. Turns out, they couldn't even find the start button. When Ethan McCall took over as CTO at Meridian Living Solutions, he brought a storm of buzzwords with him. Streamlining, modernizing, eliminating single points of failure, and to the board, it all sounded brilliant. Except the single point of failure he kept referring to was Daniel Cole. Fresh off his MBA from Wharton, Ethan oozed confidence. Italian shoes, custom-tailored suits, and PowerPoint decks that dazzled. Within weeks, he presented a plan. Reduce costs by retiring legacy systems and legacy people. The first target, the man who had built the company's entire IT infrastructure. No system should rely on one person, Ethan said, standing before the board. We can replace Daniel with 3 agile, trainable engineers at a fraction of the cost. 3 young engineers were hired straight out of prestigious schools. They were sharp, ambitious, and eager to prove themselves. Their first assignment? Reverse engineer the system Daniel had built over 18 years. There was just one problem: no documentation. Not because Daniel was hiding anything, but because every time he'd proposed creating a documentation team, the budget had been denied. Too expensive, they said. Not a priority. We've got Daniel, they used to say. Now they didn't. The junior engineers dove into the code and found chaos. It wasn't messy, it was elegant, but it was deep. Layers of logic, custom algorithms, embedded redundancies, a digital jungle built to survive anything except ignorance. Ethan didn't see the warning signs. He saw progress charts and milestone dashboards. He assured the board that onboarding was going well. But then systems began to break. The tenant portal glitched. Payment processing duplicated transactions. Maintenance requests piled up unresolved. Ethan scheduled emergency meetings. He pushed the engineers harder, sent out lengthy emails and reorganized team sprints. But what he never asked was, how do you replace someone who was never meant to be replaced? Meanwhile, Daniel sat on his back deck overlooking Lake Norman, sipping coffee and watching ducks glide across the still water. He didn't feel satisfaction, not yet. But he knew one thing. When you fire the foundation, don't be surprised when the house starts to fall. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam the door. He didn't even look back. But in that silence, he left behind a system no one else could control. Daniel Cole walked slowly down the hallway of Meridian Living Solutions, a cardboard box cradled in his arms. Inside, 18 years of memories, a few old tech manuals, an outdated mouse he never replaced, and a photo of his first engineering team, long gone. No one said goodbye. A few looked up as he passed, then quickly looked away. The silence was louder than any farewell. Maybe they were afraid, because today it was Daniel, and tomorrow it might be them. Out in the parking lot, the sky hung low and grey. He slid the box into the back seat of his old Ford Ranger, shut the door gently, and just sat. No anger, no tears, just a strange, hollow calm. By the time he pulled into his driveway on the edge of Lake Norman, dusk had settled. The porch light flickered on as he stepped inside. He poured a glass of bourbon, took it to the back deck, and sank into his favourite chair. The lake shimmered under a cotton candy sky, peaceful, still. But Daniel's mind was anything but. His wife, Linda, came out and rested a hand on his shoulder. "How are you feeling?" "They replaced me with 3 kids," he said softly. "That should work out fine." She didn't laugh, just sat down beside him. In his head, Ethan's voice echoed again. Nothing personal, just cost-cutting. Daniel hadn't pushed back, hadn't argued, and that was the part that rattled them. They expected a fight, a lawyer, an outburst. But Daniel, he gave them silence. And in that silence, he left something behind. What no one realized, not Ethan, not HR, not the 3 fresh-faced engineers, was that Daniel didn't just build the system. He was the system. He hadn't hoarded knowledge. He'd offered to document everything, but was turned down. Too expensive, not urgent. "We've got Daniel." Now they didn't, and the system, it was still running. For now. But Daniel knew something they didn't. The cracks wouldn't take long to show. There were triggers, dependencies, subroutines written to guard tenant data like Fort Knox. Miss one protocol and things would begin to unravel, quietly, then all at once. He wouldn't have to sabotage anything. He just had to sit still. A week later, the phone rang. "Want to run the system?" "Sure, just navigate a digital labyrinth with hidden keys, tripwires and security locks. Too bad only one man ever held the map. And he's gone now." Daniel Cole knew exactly what he'd built. It wasn't just a network. It wasn't a pile of code. It was a living architecture, one that had evolved alongside the company over 18 long years. It had layers, logic, triggers and redundancies woven so tightly together that even a single misstep could cause a silent cascade. It ran perfectly, because Daniel knew how to speak its language. But now he was gone, and no one else could read the map. Meridian Living Solutions had always treated Daniel like a walking, talking knowledge base. Every time he proposed forming a documentation team, they brushed it off. "We've got you, Daniel," they'd say. Translation: why invest in documentation when we've got the guy who built it? But now they had 3 bright new engineers, fresh from Stanford, MIT and Berkeley, eager, talented, confident and totally lost. The codebase was deep, elegant, obscure, custom-built solutions layered over old protocols, intertwined with proprietary scripts written in ways that only made sense if you'd watched it evolve. There was no user manual, only Daniel's memory. And Daniel? He was sitting on his back deck sipping bourbon. The engineers tried their best. They followed the threads. They ran test environments. They pinged each other late into the night. "Some of this code is recursive," one of them said. "It references modules I can't even find." "There's no standard naming convention," said another. "He used pattern triggers. It's like playing 4D chess with a ghost." Ethan McCall, the CTO who'd orchestrated Daniel's exit, didn't get it. "He couldn't have left us with nothing," Ethan said in a leadership meeting. "There has to be something we're missing." There was. It was called Daniel. Then the system began to misbehave. Tenant maintenance requests vanished. A payroll cycle failed to trigger. Credit card payments glitched and duplicated for thousands of residents. The team scrambled. They patched what they could. But with every fix came another break. The system wasn't attacking them. It was defending itself. Like it had been programmed to expect outsiders. In truth, Daniel hadn't booby-trapped anything. He didn't have to. All he had to do was not be there. Back on Lake Norman, Daniel watched the sun dip behind the trees. His phone sat on the table beside him, still silent. He took another sip of bourbon and smiled faintly. They'd call. Eventually. Some systems weren't meant to be learned. They were meant to be built and protected. They thought Daniel was replaceable. 3 days after he walked out, the system began collapsing, one function at a time, and it was only the beginning. Day 1 without Daniel? Smooth sailing. The office buzzed with a false sense of calm. Ethan McCall walked the halls with his usual swagger. The junior engineers typed away confidently. But by day 3, things began to break. The first red flag came from customer support. Tenants are reporting login failures on the portal. Then came the second. Auto payments aren't processing. We're seeing hundreds of transaction declines. By 4 p.m, maintenance teams started flooding inboxes with identical complaints. Our dashboards are empty. No requests are coming through. What started as minor glitches soon escalated into widespread system failure. Ethan called an emergency meeting. The junior team scrambled to dig through the logs. Josh, the brightest of the three, raised his hand nervously. There's a legacy module handling maintenance requests. It routes through a security protocol, but the protocol's logic is abstracted in a class we can't locate. Ethan frowned. Meaning? Meaning the system is calling functions we don't understand. Worse, the system doesn't seem to understand itself anymore. Within 48 hours, thousands of tenants couldn't pay rent. Requests for plumbing, electrical and general repairs vanished into thin air. Technicians sat idle. The system never assigned them anything. Phone lines blew up. Complaints flooded in. Some tenants threatened lawsuits over late fees. Others demanded lease terminations. It wasn't a bug. It wasn't even sabotage. It was the natural consequence of removing the only person who understood the machine. Ethan stared at his screen in disbelief. He remembered a conversation, one he'd dismissed too quickly, where Daniel had warned him. You can't maintain this system unless you know how it breathes. If you don't invest in documentation and training when things go wrong, no one will even know where to start. Daniel hadn't been bitter. He'd been right. Back at Lake Norman, Daniel sat on his deck, sipping coffee as dusk fell across the water. He hadn't checked his phone all day. He didn't need to. He already knew what was coming. And right on cue, his phone lit up on the table beside him. Caller ID. Meridian Corporate. They said he was too expensive. Now they were offering $500 an hour and begging him to return. But Daniel wasn't waiting by the phone anymore. The first call came Monday morning. Daniel was watering the garden when his phone buzzed. Unknown number, familiar area code. He let it ring. Voicemail came seconds later. Ethan's voice, tight and urgent. Daniel, we're having issues with the tenant portal. The new team is working on it, but they're struggling with the architecture. If you could give us a call, maybe just a few hours of consulting. Daniel hit delete. By noon, 3 more calls. One from HR, one from Ethan's assistant, one from Brandon Oak, the founder's son. Brandon's message was direct. Daniel, I know things ended badly, but the company needs you. We're prepared to offer $500 per hour for consulting support. We're in over our heads. Daniel sat on his back porch, watching the wind brush across Lake Norman. He wasn't surprised. He just hadn't expected it this soon. His wife, Linda, placed a fresh cup of coffee on the table. You going to call them back? They're learning the lesson they refused to hear. That afternoon, Daniel made the call. Not for the money, but to hear the shift in Ethan's voice. Ethan picked up on the second ring. Daniel, thank God. We're in a critical situation. The payment system is completely down. External consultants can't decipher the database structure. We really need your help. How many hours are you asking for? As many as you'll give us. The board approved $500 an hour. 4-hour minimum per day. We'll sign whatever you need. I'll think about it, Daniel said, then hung up. No contract, no commitment, just silence. He wanted them to feel the helplessness they once assumed he'd feel. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming. More desperate, more pleading. Even Justin Oak, the former owner, reached out, asking Daniel to come back, just temporarily. But Daniel knew better. Going back wouldn't fix what was broken. The system could be salvaged. The culture couldn't. And Daniel had already stepped into something better, a place that valued wisdom as investment, not overhead. While his old company begged him to fix what was falling apart, someone else offered him a chance to build something from the ground up. Daniel didn't just take a new job. He stepped into a place that saw his worth before the system crashed. After the desperate voicemails, the last-minute offers, and even the guilt-laced apologies, Daniel stopped answering calls from Meridian altogether. His mind was made up. 2 days after Ethan's last plea, Daniel walked into a quiet cafe in downtown Charlotte. Waiting for him was Lawrence Pierce, the director of technology at Ironbridge Systems, a growing force in the property tech world, and more importantly, a company that understood what it needed. "I've heard about the system you built at Meridian," Lawrence said after a brief handshake. "It's practically legendary in the industry." Daniel offered a humble smile. "It was built piece by piece, always with reliability first." "Exactly what we're missing," Lawrence said. "We've got a pretty product, modern UI, but it crashes every time we get over 100 simultaneous users." Then came the offer, slid across the table in a folder that was clean, simple, and confident. Title, Chief Systems Architect. Salary, 20% more than Meridian ever paid. Equity, full benefits, and full architectural control. Daniel stared at it, not because he was unsure, but because he was considering what it meant to build again, the right way. "I'll accept," he said, "but I have one condition." "What's that?" "We build it right. Documentation from day one. Team training. No shortcuts, no budget hacks. We build for stability, not just to check a box." Lawrence didn't hesitate. "We're not looking for cheap engineers. We're looking for someone who knows that a solid system isn't an expense. It's an asset." They shook hands. As Daniel stepped out of the cafe into the Carolina sun, he felt something he hadn't in years. Respected. They thought the worst was behind them when Daniel walked out the door. Turns out that was just the beginning of the collapse. By the 3rd week after Daniel Cole's departure from Meridian Living Solutions, the cracks in the system had turned into full-blown chasms. The tenant portal? Still broken. Automated payments? Still glitching. But the real bombshell dropped on a Tuesday morning. A junior engineer attempted to access the company's database backups. "We're missing 3 years of data," he reported, panicked. "Some backups are blank, others are encrypted, and no one has the decryption key." CTO Ethan McCall froze. He immediately called in the expensive outside consultants they'd hired as backup. After 2 full days digging through code and server logs, the lead consultant delivered the verdict. "The backup system is custom, highly customized. Without the original architect, recovery will take 4 to 6 months, and there's no guarantee we'll get everything back." Ethan slumped in his chair. And then the real chaos began. The IT team started to implode. Resignations came in like falling dominoes. 1, then 3, then 6. It wasn't just the workload, it was the hopelessness. They weren't solving problems, they were guessing their way through a system no one understood. One resignation email said it best. "There is no documentation, no training, no leadership. The only person who knew this system was Daniel, and you let him go. I'm not fixing software. I'm trying to survive a collapsing cathedral built by a single architect who left with a blueprint." The company's operations ground to a halt. 3 years of financial records gone. Rent reconciliations impossible. Angry tenants flooding phone lines. Key clients quietly preparing to sever contracts. Every emergency meeting, every late-night email, every nervous board call came back to the same question. Can we get Daniel back? But Daniel wasn't waiting. He was already building something new, somewhere that saw his value before the sky fell. Getting fired was painful, but realizing it was all part of a spreadsheet, a calculated cost-saving move to boost sale value, that burned deeper than betrayal. Daniel Cole was sipping afternoon coffee in his new office at Ironbridge Systems when a familiar figure stepped into the doorway. Alan, the former database administrator from Meridian. He looked uneasy, tense. In his hands, a laptop. "Got a minute?" They headed to a nearby diner, the kind with booths and refills. Amid the clatter of plates and low hum of conversation, Alan leaned in. "I found something. In the archived server logs, emails, ones they thought were deleted." He opened the laptop. Daniel's eyes scanned the screen. Thread subject, Legacy Staff Reduction Plan. First name listed Daniel Cole. "Our current infrastructure is too dependent on one engineer," Ethan McCall had written. "By replacing him with junior staff, we reduce maintenance costs significantly. Estimated annual savings, over $1 million. Simplifying the system also makes us more attractive to buyers. Daniel leaned back in the booth. It wasn't just a layoff, it was a strategy. He was a financial liability they needed to cut to shine up the books before a sale. You were right, Alan said. It was never about modernization. It was about painting over the cracks before selling the building. Alan stirred his coffee, then added, I quit. Half the IT team did. And Meridian's largest client, Westshore Properties, they're threatening to walk. Daniel didn't speak right away, but his silence wasn't stunned. It was focused, not sad, not vengeful, clear. Bugs can be fixed, staff can be replaced. But when your biggest client walks out the door, what's left is rubble. Bravestone Group wasn't just another client. They were the client, managing over 10,000 residential units along the eastern seaboard. For them, a functioning system wasn't a luxury. It was the foundation of their operations, and that foundation was now crumbling. The tenant portal, unresponsive. The payment processor, throwing errors. The maintenance schedule, blank. At first, Bravestone sent polite emails, then formal warnings, and finally a document that hit Meridian like a torpedo. If full functionality is not restored within 7 days, Bravestone will terminate its service agreement and begin migrating to a new platform. Ethan McCall stared at the letter. 30% of Meridian's revenue, gone. Worse, they were in the middle of courting buyers. Losing Bravestone would cut the company's value in half overnight. A crisis meeting was called. Legal, tech, the exhausted remnants of the IT team. Board members who'd once applauded Ethan's cost-cutting brilliance now sat in silence. Call Daniel, someone finally said. If we don't get him back in the next 72 hours, Bravestone is gone. Ethan closed his eyes. He'd made too many wrong moves. But Daniel had moved on. While Meridian scrambled to survive, across town at Iron Bridge Systems, Daniel was finalizing an infrastructure proposal. The client? Bravestone Group. They wanted him back to fix the mess they made. But Daniel had already walked through a new door. This time he wasn't cleaning up. He was building from the ground up. His way. The moment Bravestone Group sent official notice to cut ties with Meridian, Daniel's office phone rang. Lawrence Pierce, CTO of Iron Bridge Systems, stepped in holding an envelope and a look of opportunity. Bravestone called me directly, Lawrence said. They know you're with us now. They want to know, can we build them something better than what Meridian ever had? Daniel said nothing at first. He opened the envelope. Inside, a formal proposal from Bravestone. Full data migration from Meridian, funding for infrastructure expansion over 12 weeks, exclusive platform use, if it works. Daniel nodded slowly, a spark in his eyes that hadn't been there in years. Not only can I build it better, he said, I can build it right. But this time, no shortcuts, no budget hacks, I do it my way. Lawrence smiled. At Iron Bridge, that's the only way we do it. Within 48 hours, Daniel delivered a full system architecture plan, modular core, scalable across regions, multi-tiered security with dynamic access layers, full documentation process from day one, code, ops, and training. Bravestone signed off. They agreed to fund the servers, hire 3 senior engineers, and assign a dedicated data migration team. Iron Bridge didn't just win Bravestone. They were becoming the next serious contender in the prop tech industry. And Daniel, for the first time in a long time, he wasn't putting out fires. He was building something to last. With a team that trusted him and a vision that wasn't sacrificed on the altar of short-term cost savings. At Meridian, documentation was a luxury. At Iron Bridge, Daniel made it non-negotiable. This wasn't just another project, it was a legacy. The day Iron Bridge Systems sealed the deal with Bravestone, Daniel called an all-hands meeting with the engineering team. No flashy slides, no quarterly goals. Just him, a dry erase marker, and a whiteboard. I'm not here to build something flashy, he began. I'm here to build something that still works 10 years from now, even if none of us are around to fix it. He wrote 3 rules in bold. 1, documentation from day 1. 2, cross-training, no silos. 3, no single points of failure, ever. Some of the junior engineers looked confused. One raised a hand. So what if we're under deadline pressure? Do we skip documentation then? Daniel turned to face him fully. We don't ever trade long-term stability for short-term speed, because if we do, 3 years from now, someone will be sitting in your chair, panicking, trying to understand code that makes no sense. From that day forward, every line of code came with comments, operations manuals, and internal wiki entries. Every new engineer went through 2 weeks of onboarding, not just technical training, but a deep dive into the philosophy of building things to last. Daniel also implemented a redundant roles system, where no part of the system relied on a single person. Anyone could step away, and things kept running. Ironbridge wasn't building fast, they were building right. And woven through every commit, every spec doc, every training slide was one simple principle. This isn't just about code. It's about never letting anyone go through what I did at Meridian. He was once cast out as an unnecessary expense. Now he returned, not to settle the score, but to rebuild what they had broken. On his terms. 6 months after Ironbridge Systems successfully onboarded Bravestone Group, the next big move was made official. Ironbridge acquired Meridian Living Solutions for less than a quarter of its previous valuation. The Meridian board? Disbanded. Ethan McCall? Gone. The same executives who once greenlit Daniel's dismissal? Quietly stepped down. At the first company-wide meeting held inside Meridian's former headquarters, Lawrence, now CEO of Ironbridge, addressed the room. "We need someone to lead the integration between both systems," he said. "Someone who understands what was built and what needs to come next." Then he turned to Daniel. "There's no one better." Daniel stepped to the front of the room. Some faces looked away, others gave quiet nods. The silence was thick. Not with resentment, but with reflection. He didn't come to gloat. "I'm not here to revisit old mistakes," Daniel said. "I'm here to make sure that this time we do it right." Over the next several weeks, Daniel worked side by side with teams across both companies. He assessed legacy code, identified what could be salvaged, and mapped out a clean migration path to Ironbridge's architecture. He didn't clean house. He retained talent, especially those who knew the old system, and retrained them for the new vision. This time, Daniel told his managers, "We're not cutting people for profit, we're bringing people forward with the technology." Eventually, Daniel found himself back in the very room where Ethan McCall once handed him a severance envelope. But now, Daniel was at the head of the table. In front of him, a blueprint for the future. Around him, a team ready to build it. No grudges, no revenge. Just restoration, done right. He had every reason to burn it all down, but Daniel didn't come back for revenge. He came back to build something better with those willing to do it right. The merger between Ironbridge and Meridian was anything but simple. 2 platforms, 2 company cultures, 2 very different mindsets. But Daniel didn't choose the fast route. He chose the right one. In his first week, he met one-on-one with every former Meridian team lead. No interviews, no tests. Just one question. Sure. Are you willing to start fresh and learn how to build this the right way, even if it means letting go of code you once wrote? Some said yes. Some hesitated. Some quietly walked away. Those who stayed found Daniel not acting like a returning boss, but a mentor learning alongside them. He hosted legacy code reviews where the team dissected old modules, not to assign blame, but to learn. "We don't get embarrassed for doing it wrong back then," Daniel said. "We only get embarrassed if we're too proud to do it better now." Over time, a new culture emerged. Transparent architecture, cross-functional learning, respect for experience, not just age, not just titles. A junior engineer whispered to his teammate after a review session, "I think Daniel's teaching us to build something more durable than code, a real team." Daniel didn't need to forgive the past, he just needed to walk forward, with the people who chose to walk with him. A year ago, they called him too expensive. Now he's the architect behind the system powering the largest property management firm in the Northeast. He didn't win with promises, he won with durability. 12 months after the merger, Ironbridge Systems wasn't just surviving, it was dominating. With over 150,000 residential units managed through its platform, Ironbridge wasn't seen as the company that replaced Meridian anymore. It was the company others were now trying to emulate. The system Daniel built? It ran like a Swiss watch. Every tenant interaction logged and responded to in real time. Data encrypted, backed up, and regularly audited. Every process, from lease applications to maintenance tickets, had documentation, training, and fallback procedures. Daniel didn't talk much about it. He didn't have to. Every time a subsystem handled an outage in seconds, or a junior tech resolved an issue by reading a manual instead of calling a lead, it reinforced what Daniel had been preaching for years. Quality is not wasteful, it's resilient. At a company town hall, CEO Lawrence stood before the team beaming. When we asked Daniel to build something better, he didn't just deliver. He changed how we think about technology. We're not just building software anymore, we're building trust. Daniel smiled quietly from the side of the stage. For him, the victory wasn't in applause or headlines, it was in a simple, quiet truth. The system worked, and people understood it. They once called his training proposal unnecessary and too expensive. Now he was building the very academy that would train engineers to carry an entire industry, not just to code, but to build what lasts. It was a crisp autumn morning when Daniel stepped into Lawrence's office at Ironbridge. Waiting on the desk was a freshly signed document, board approval for the launch of the Systems Engineering Academy, with Daniel as its founder and director. Lawrence didn't say much. He simply handed over the folder and nodded. Build the program like you built the system. Choose the people. Set the tone. As long as it meets Ironbridge standards, you've got my support. To most, it was just an internal training division. To Daniel, it was a promise fulfilled. Back at Meridian, he had pitched the idea for years, a program to train engineers not just to code fast, but to build things worth trusting. We don't need more coders, he once said. We need people who ask the right questions, design for failure, and understand that documentation isn't a formality, it's a foundation. Meridian rejected it. Ironbridge embraced it. Now, Daniel was finally building what he had envisioned for 2 decades. 3 months later, the first cohort walked into the classroom. No flashy slides, no corporate jargon. Daniel opened with a story. Someday, you'll build a system thousands of people rely on, to live, to work, to feel safe. They won't know your name, but they'll know if you get it wrong. Your job is to make sure they never have to know you existed. The room was silent. New grads, veteran techs, they all understood this wasn't a course, it was a mindset. Daniel wasn't just training engineers, he was passing down a way of thinking, how to build systems that don't break. Some apologies can't undo the past, but sometimes they're enough to close a chapter and begin a new one, built on respect. That afternoon, just as Daniel was packing up, he noticed Brandon Oak standing by his door. Gone was the polished executive. No silk tie, no rehearsed smile, just a man carrying the weight of something he needed to say. "Got a minute?" Brandon asked. Daniel nodded. "Walk with me?" They strolled around the Ironbridge campus, once Meridian's headquarters. Same building, same trees, but everything else had changed. "I spoke with my father," Brandon began. "He's retired now, down in Florida, but he's been following the news. When he heard Ironbridge had acquired Meridian, the first thing he asked was, 'Did Daniel come back?'" Daniel smiled faintly. Brandon stopped walking, turned to face him. "He once told me, if they ever let Daniel go, it'll be the biggest mistake this company will ever make." He was right. No dramatic music, no applause, just the breeze, and a long overdue moment of truth. Daniel didn't answer immediately. They walked a few more steps. "I'm not angry," he said quietly. "I'm just sad we didn't get it right the first time." Brandon nodded. Then, with surprising humility, he made an unexpected request. "I'm not asking to go back to Meridian, because Meridian is Ironbridge now, but I'd like to join your training program, not as an instructor, as a student." Daniel looked at him again, and for the first time in years, he didn't see a nameplate or a title. He saw a man ready to start over. "All right," Daniel said, "but I'm giving you a harder test than everyone else. You know I don't go easy." Brandon laughed, genuinely, and Daniel walked on, carrying a past that no longer hurt, and a future that, this time, would be built right.